Alright guys, Yipship here with another video, and this one's going to be on a Warlock kind of Affliction gear rant slash every single Warlock spec and how the spec kind of works with better gear and why I think this is an issue. So, Affliction, Demo, and Destro are all fairly gear dependent relative to other classes. When you first hit level 110, and as you're slowly gearing up and start getting regular Mythic Dungeon gear and Mythic Plus Dungeon gear, your DPS isn't that great. Your DPS is actually quite low relative to other classes, specifically Demon Hunters, Mages, things like that. They're really going to be outpacing you at the early stages, but later on you'll start to catch up, and even probably later into the expansion we'll be doing better. And I'm going to show you guys why that is and kind of talk about why it's an issue and see if they can kind of fix that issue that we are having with gear. So the way that I want to sort of display everything to you guys is by showing you what I mean with a picture. So here's Paint. It's a nice little tool, and I'm going to draw some graphs with you guys and show you what I mean. So I'm going to draw 3 graphs, and one for each of the Warlock specs. So the first one's going to be for Destro. Next one's going to be for Demonology. And the last one is going to be for Affliction. And I think these graphs are going to show you pretty clearly what I mean by scaling with gear. So on the bottom axis, we're going to have item level. And on the top axis, we're going to have DPS. And this obviously isn't 100% accurate, but I feel like it's pretty good. So as Destro, you're going to start out at a base point, like say around here. And then you're going to go up linearly. And this is going to be your DPS line for Destro. It's not a straight line, but you know, it's pretty good. So this is going to be your DPS output for Destro Warlocks, right? So Destro Warlocks, they have a pretty good DPS output. You know, it goes up pretty linearly with item level. It doesn't change too much. This is going to be for single target and for multi-target. At lower item levels, you're still going to be doing good damage relative to at higher item levels. And, you know, the scaling doesn't really change too much. Obviously, when you get higher haste and crit, it does go up a little bit. But overall, it's a pretty straight line. And we're going to look at Demonology Warlocks. So if this was Destro start, we're going to put Demo start a little bit lower than Destro. We're going to put Demo's start line down here because when you start as a Demo Warlock, you don't have things like 30% haste. You don't have things like good relics. You don't have all those artifact traits and things like that, which really affect your DPS a lot. So as a Demonology Warlock, you might start a little bit lower, but it still tends to scale pretty linearly, except once you hit 30% haste, your DPS kind of starts going up like this. Okay, so this point here is 30% haste. Now this is a rough estimate. So you can see, as you're getting more geared as a Demonology Warlock, your DPS doesn't start as high as Destro does, but it ramps up a lot better than Destro's DPS does. The line is a lot steeper than Destro, so as each item level you get, you're going to generate more DPS per item level than Destro would, although Destro has a higher starting base. So overall, Demo's going to be better at those higher item levels. Now for Affliction, let's just say you start basically close to 0 DPS with no gear, and the way that Affliction's graph kind of looks is something like this, where you start very weak and your buildup is extremely gradual until you start getting that crazy gear, and then it just shoots up off the board. And I think this is a really big issue, because if you were to overlap all of these things, obviously at the very high end, Affliction's probably doing similar to Demonology, if not better, but at the lower end, it's just not even close, right? It's not even a competition. So I think this is a really big deal, and I think this is something that Blizzard has to address. And I think they are addressing it in 7.1.5 with those secondary changes and with the changes to stat on rings and things like that, with the changes to increasing the overall value of intellect. I really hope that this brings up the baseline for an Affliction Warlock, because I'm going to be honest with you guys, okay? When I started playing Affliction Warlock, I wasn't doing 500k DPS single target. I wasn't even doing close. I was doing like 400k, and my sims were saying I was doing 400k, but guess what my item level was? My item level was 882. In 5 item levels, I went up 100,000 DPS. This obviously has to do with getting my 5%, well 6.5 now, but when I got my 5%, it has to do with finishing off my artifact tree. It has to do with getting some really nice relics. It has to do with a lot of factors, but in 5 item levels, my DPS went up by 100,000. It was unbelievable. Like, I didn't think my DPS would go up that much for every piece of gear I got that was an upgrade for all these things, but it scaled so well. And I was really surprised to see that, compared to my demonology DPS, which was kind of flatlining at about, 480k, 490k single target, no matter what gear I got. It was mostly a legendary thing that I needed to really boost my DPS up any more than what it already was at. So when I get, a lot of messages from other warlocks, affliction warlocks talking to me saying, "Yo, man, I'm this so and so item level. I'm only doing 380k DPS. Help me out. What's my problem?" I'm like, you know what? Like 380k DPS isn't bad for an affliction warlock single target. It's actually quite good. And when they start telling me about their gear and their artifact level, it starts to make sense. If you don't have your 5%, if you're not running with the helm, if your item level is only, between 870 and 885, then yeah, I wouldn't expect to do more than 400k DPS single target. It's just not going to happen at that item level with that artifact. It's just not possible. And I think that's something to take into, perspective when playing a warlock is, yeah, you're not going to be as powerful at the lower 860, 870 item levels. Sure, you'll still be able to do good cleave damage, but your single target is obviously going to suffer a lot relative to other classes at lower gear scores. But once you start getting those high item levels, once you start getting that really nice gear that's going to be coming out, and that's already out in Trials of Valor and things like that, your DPS is really going to push up quite a bit, and you can really look forward to that. So another thing that this, representation sort of tells you is you just kind of start playing as a Destro Warlock once you hit 110, and then after you start getting some gear, after you start hitting those caps that are necessary to play Affliction and Demonology, then you can do the switch over. Then you can change, start playing those specs, start seeing a lot better results, because I'm going to be honest, if you're playing Affliction, if you're playing Demonology, right as soon as you hit level 110, you're going to be disappointed, and it's going to be a really hard grind for you. So thanks for watching this video. Hopefully it helped you make some decisions and things like that, and hopefully it made you feel a little bit better about your DPS if you feel like you're not performing as well. And a lot of that just probably has to do with item level and gear. So thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you guys later.